Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to challenge a really basic assumption that you probably make every single day without even realizing it. And that's the assumption that the truth is just always obvious, right? We walk around feeling perfectly confident that we know exactly what's real and what isn't. But, well, do we really? Seriously, how do you know what you know? We all make claims to knowledge all day long, but questioning the actual underlying principles behind our own daily reality, that can be incredibly destabilizing. Honestly, the deeper you look into this stuff, the less you realize you actually know. It's kind of like a giant puzzle, a bit of a rabbit hole, but we're going to go down it anyway, because it is absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the search for knowledge, break down the 3 theories of truth, and explore the 3 levels of inquiry. After that, we're going to take a look at a case study, the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, to really unpack exactly why truth is so complex. All right, section 1, the search for knowledge. Defining epistemology.
So here's the thing. Every single one of us relies on a hidden framework to figure out the world, whether we actively realize it or not. Even professionals whose entire job revolves around facts, like journalists, rely on this hidden framework. And that framework, that's epistemology. Basically, it's a branch of philosophy concerning the search for a theory of knowledge. I know, that sounds a little intimidating. It's the kind of academic word that can make you question everything. But at its core, epistemology is simply the study of how we validate our claims to know things.
And that leads us directly to a really foundational concept, justified true belief. In traditional philosophy, just believing something on faith or because it came to you in a wild dream, that just isn't enough to call it knowledge. To truly have knowledge, you must believe it to be true, it must actually be true, and crucially, you must be justified in that belief, meaning you have a solid, reasonable, objective basis for knowing it's true. Moving right along to section 2, 3 theories of truth, the rule of 3. Now, truth seems like a pretty simple yes or no concept, right? Like you're sitting in a room or you aren't. But philosophy actually categorizes our approaches into 3 distinct buckets: correspondence, coherence, and consensus, which is also known as pragmatism. Simplifying this incredibly complex field into this rule of 3 is really going to help us organize our thinking moving forward. Let's look at them one by one. First up is correspondence. This approach basically says a claim is true if it maps directly to an independent reality. For example, if I make the claim, "This table is made of wood," well, that statement is true only if the physical table in front of me is actually constructed from wood. Makes sense, right? This theory maps perfectly onto science, where a truth claim is valid if it perfectly matches the real, physical world, totally independent of our feelings about it. Next is coherence. And this brilliantly illustrates how the human mind actually works in practice. So often, we choose to believe claims not just because of raw data, but because they cohere, or fit seamlessly, into our broader worldview. Think of Galileo in history. His heliocentric model, claiming the Earth revolved around the sun, was incredibly controversial. Why? Well, because it completely failed to cohere with the established, deeply rooted belief that Earth was the center of the universe. The third approach is consensus. This one is strongly linked to American pragmatism and thinkers like John Dewey. Under this theory, something is considered true if it works for us collectively to solve social problems. It doesn't necessarily matter if it maps perfectly to physical reality or fits older models. If a social group reaches a consensus and that belief helps them function and solve problems, they treat it as the truth. Basically, reality becomes what works. Let's hit section 3, 3 levels of inquiry, mapping concepts. What's really interesting about this is how beautifully these 3 levels of questioning map perfectly onto our 3 theories of truth. When we engage in empirical inquiry, looking at raw facts and data, it aligns perfectly with the correspondence theory. When we use analytical inquiry to figure out how things work and fit together, that connects directly to coherence. And when we make normative inquiries, like moral or political judgments about how the world should be, that requires us to reach a consensus. They are entirely interconnected. Okay, moving on to section 4, case study Iraq 2003, testing reality. So let's take these abstract ideas out of the classroom and apply them to a high-stakes, real-world stress test. Was the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 lawful? Now, to be absolutely clear here, we are approaching this strictly as impartial observers. We're not taking a political side, and we are not making a moral judgment about the war itself. We are simply taking an objective legal question and testing how truth is constructed around it. To determine if the invasion was lawful, we have to look at the established law. The foundational document of international law is the UN Charter. According to this charter, there are exactly 2 conditions for lawful war. Number 1, a UN Security Council resolution authorizes force, or number 2, Article 51 allows for self-defense, but only against an imminent threat. Those are literally the only 2 legal avenues available.
So let's neutrally test the historical facts against these 2 conditions. For Condition 1, the established record shows the U.S. requested a Security Council resolution, but the UN actually declined to pass it. For Condition 2, the administration's own stated claims focused on long-term threats, not the specific, legally required standard of an imminent threat. So looking squarely at the facts, neither of the 2 UN conditions were met.
And this brings up a really fascinating intersection of laws. Under international law, unapproved military aggression is legally defined as a crime against peace. But what about at home? Well, under domestic law, Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution explicitly makes signed international treaties the supreme law of the land. So, because the U.S. Constitution legally binds the country to the UN Charter, the failure to meet those 2 UN conditions logically points directly to the invasion being unlawful, both internationally and domestically. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5. Why truth is complex, the conflict of claims. If the logical conclusion from the established documents is so straightforward, why isn't this widely accepted as fact? Why is it even controversial? Well, think back to our theories. If we only apply the correspondence test, the truth claim seems perfectly valid and logically proven. The legal documents say one thing, the historical timeline says another, and the facts directly point to the invasion being unlawful. If truth were exclusively about corresponding data mapping to reality, boom, this would be the end of the discussion. But it's not the end of the discussion, is it? So the crucial point is this. This truth claim completely fails the coherence test. Calling the invasion unlawful violently contradicts how American society fundamentally views itself. It clashes directly with the deeply held national self-image of a country rooted in the rule of law, a nation that inherently uses its military power for good. The raw facts simply do not cohere with that established system of belief. And because this claim lacks coherence with the national identity, it inevitably hits the consensus block. Society simply has not collectively agreed that the war was unlawful. This brilliantly illustrates that in the real world, truth is about so much more than just having the best facts or the most accurate documents. It's deeply, deeply intertwined with human psychology, identity, and social agreement. Which leaves us with this incredible final thought to ponder. If a truth claim is completely compelling, factually accurate, and logically sound based on all the documents, but nobody agrees with it, is it actually true? I mean, really think about that. It perfectly summarizes just how deeply complex and completely socially dependent our daily concept of truth really is. Keep that in mind the next time you ask yourself how you know what you know. Thanks for joining me on this explainer today.